ZbWKwL Virginia Bigfoot Conference sponsors. Sponsored and promoted by Legit Paranormal. Welcome everybody to Bigfoot Zone. Please give a warm welcome to our guest tonight, Marcus Hawley.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Bigfoot Zone, ECBRO, and I want to welcome Marcus Hawley to the show. Am I pronouncing your last name correctly? I have to ask this with everybody.
Okay. Absolutely, it's just like the bush, and I love the intro, by the way, the Bigfoot talking and everything, it's great.
Yeah, it's actually my voice with my voice app I use. So.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I like getting creative, so gotta have fun with it though. You gotta have fun.
Absolutely.
So. Absolutely, yeah, for sure, absolutely. And just to let you give you a heads up, there is usually people that like to interact in the live chat, which we do encourage. For those who are already watching, yeah, we encourage you to interact, ask questions. I will try my best to watch the live chat, so you'll probably see my face disappear off the screen periodically. So, and we got some viewers. The audience is building up right now. And I want to tell everybody, please take the opportunity. If you're just now joining in, feel free to share this around. Share it in your Bigfoot group. Share it with your friends, family, or whatnot. And again, questions are welcome. And if this is your first time jumping on here and first time watching, first of all, let me welcome you. And that must be your wife that's watching from Freedom Farmstead, South Carolina.
Yes, it is.
Awesome. Yeah, I learned that was you guys when I was stalking y'all's Facebook pages there to learn information. So
excellent. So, I mean, we do all sorts of things here, like everything from homesteading to making children's books. So it's like we're just trying to keep all of our bases covered and keep busy with everything we do.
Absolutely. So I'm surprised, well, first of all, let me ask you, how long have you been involved with doing Barry Bigfoot? Is this something new or?
Well, that's kind of like a yes and no, because I've always loved doing artwork, and I've always loved like having like little cartoon sketches and things. And probably the first time I had an idea for Barry specifically was probably around, I'd say 2015 or something, because I was messing with these other characters I had. They were some aliens I was making about Frank and Jank, and how they were going to interact on the world was they had to have some sort of suit, and the original suit was going to be Barry Bigfoot, like a Bigfoot suit. And so that's where the first sketch of him came up. And then it just kind of got put on the back burner, and he didn't jump back into the reality of coming into being a character again until my oldest son ended up having an art class to where he was going to be making his own pushing his own character to make a comic book. And so I sat down with him, and so I'm like, well, I'm going to revamp this guy. So it was my oldest son really inspiring me to get back to drawing this character again. And he just ended up taking off a life of his own with all the knowledge that I have on Bigfoot, because I've always liked the paranormal and all the cryptid things. And it's just been kind of like, I really didn't jump into it until like just hearing this. It was last year, really, is when I decided to put the hammer down and just start letting all these stories come out.
Nice. So now that you are established with this, and you guys, since you started, you got a few products added to the whole Barry Bigfoot scene. I don't remember. I think you may have said or told me, but are you guys going to be joining or participating with the South Carolina Bigfoot Festival this year?
Yes, we are. We're doing. I think it's the one in Westminster.
Right. That's
We're
it.
definitely going to be doing that one, and we're also going to be doing the one in Eastern North Carolina, I think it is, and definitely up there at yours too. To where that's
Right.
just really excited about doing this because it's a fun way, and the whole thing with the children's books that I've made, it's kind of like there's a bunch there. Like I made these children's books to bring back some wholesome comedy and some wholesome stories to bring the whole family together and enjoy a topic that goes from children to adults alike. You know, to where it's like you've got the comedy kind of slapstick thing and then kind of sneak in nuggets of truth about Bigfoot along with good morals and values along the way. So it's kind of like broad strokes to a whole family entertainment thing I'm doing here with Barry.
Oh yeah. Like what you just mentioned, it reminded me of the cartoon. I don't know if you ever watched it with your kids or anything, but the Son of Bigfoot. Are you
We've
familiar
seen
with
those
that?
movies. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Bigfoot. Those are some we do enjoy every now and again here. They'll come on probably about once every other month. We'll get to watch those.
Yeah, I was actually I sat and watched it with my grandson. Well, of course, he stays still, but for so long, he's only 2, and
Yeah.
but even when he wasn't watching, I was glued to it. I was like, "This is pretty cool,"
I thought it was real entertaining how they did that movie. So it brings in the fun aspect of Bigfoot.
Absolutely. They even put stuff in there like what we're familiar with or what we are familiarize ourselves with what people associate or contribute to Bigfoot. And they actually put some stuff in there, how Bigfoot's supposed to be super fast and and some people believe that Bigfoot has different special powers, and they add that without overdoing it, which I kind of like that, So it was quite entertaining for sure. And so if anyone has not seen The Son of Bigfoot, I don't care if you're an adult, you got to check it out. It's a fun movie. There's 2 of them that I know that are out. So, but yeah, definitely check them out. So hey, perhaps that's something that you could do along with a Barry Bigfoot cartoon. I don't know if you have access. I don't know.
Now, wait a minute. Now,
I'm going.
See, what's funny is this is if you start looking more into the Instagram and the Facebook, I've actually been doing stop motion shorts or like the original animation, so where I have just little bitty things I've been playing with making the animations. And one thing I do want to end up doing is making a cartoon of Barry and then incorporate all the other characters that I'd put out there too, to where it's like you have this whole fun interaction of all these different cryptids to where they're doing kind of like zany things, and yet it all kind of ties into having like good wins the day at the end, type thing of and I don't want to get too deep into it because this is just way back on the back burner right now because it takes a lot of work. Like for one of the shorts I did that's maybe 6 seconds long, it's something to the tune of 100 or so frames that I have to do just for that. And so, it's a lot of it copying and just tweaking one little thing at a time. Like one of the last ones I did was just a Barry foot coming down and then a toes crunch and then it picks back up again. And that one was all of like 2 or 3 seconds long, and that one is around 80 frames. So it's something I'm wanting to work on. It's something that I'm doing.
Wow.
And what's even funnier is I got this animation app to where it's supposed to allow you to put in sprites and stuff to make it easier. I haven't been able to figure out my character on it to put Barry in there to put him in scenes, but yet my oldest son, he gets it, and he's already making little apps of having like little stickmen and things fighting, and I'm over here like, oh, can you show me how to do this? So
it's that. Don't you notice it's the younger ones with the creative mind, with the imagination and the ideas?
Absolutely, it's great.
I mean, I hate to say that we're old, but I mean, well, we're actually still pretty young, but the new generation, they're quite, I don't know. I guess maybe there's something. Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. yeah, I mean, there's a lot I know, but then I'm still learning. I think we're, even at I'm 40, I'll be 43 in March, and I'm still learning. So,
Well,
but
that's the funny things like what I was saying with the art stuff, and like I've even made that. I sent you a picture of it. It's the 9.5 foot tall Barry I made. It's paper mache. I
oh,
made out of the goat. It's goat fencing, paper mache, paint, and I got to touch him up a little bit. But he's huge, and my boys helped me with that as well. But yet, if it comes to something simple as emailing or what have you, I am not tech savvy whatsoever. Matter of fact, I have to say thank you to my wife because she helped get all this set up to where I can just come and just click a couple things and I could be here with you this evening.
awesome. That's awesome. Your wife's name is Melissa, correct? Am I saying?
Yes, it
Is that right? Okay. Okay. I'm just trying to continue because my other friend, there's a couple on here, David and Melissa. They're friends of mine that live here in Virginia. They're on here right now too. So, so, but yeah, your wife's under the farmstead name on here. So, okay. So yeah, but Melissa Lester and her husband David's in here with us too. So yeah,
excellent.
they're great people. Um, see, hold on. I'm popping up some of the comments here. I like to share comments. Yeah, all y'all young, all right. I may as well go play bingo. LOL.
Bingo's fun
Oh,
though.
yeah, David is a retired law officer. Now he makes donuts with his wife. So
That's awesome.
yeah, and he's probably wanting to kick me in the butt, but he looks so cute in his apron because when I walk into Krispy Kreme, I get to see him in his apron making donuts. Yeah, he knows I give him heck for that all the time. I love you,
I
David.
can't deny I'm a sucker for the hot and ready donuts though, so they're always a hit.
There we go. She said, "Dag nabbit." So, oh man. So yeah, David actually hooked me up with some donuts when I was going up to Pennsylvania a few weeks ago. I stopped in there to get a coffee. He said, "Hey, let me get." He said, "Here's a dozen donuts." He said, "Take them up there." So I went up there with to stay with my friend Gwendolyn and her husband and Michael for a Bigfoot gathering up there a few weeks ago. But yeah, that was awesome. I really appreciate them. I had a few of those donuts, but I got to watch. I'm diabetic, so
Oh yeah.
yeah. I treat myself though. Yeah, couldn't resist. So, I tell you what, let's switch gears here a little bit. Now, before Barry Bigfoot, now something happened along the lines in your life that kind
Lot.
of, yeah. I tell you what, I'm gonna let you take it from here. If you want to start off, with a storyline from where your first experience, regardless if it was Bigfoot or whatever it may have been, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Well, growing up, and I did mention to you in comments before that I grew up in a haunted house, and a lot of
Mhm.
times, like when you hear things like this, it's like, oh, that's not that real of a thing or whatever. But mine was almost a cliche haunted house, meaning like it's a house right across the street from a cemetery. We had activity that was so normal that it became part of the house to where we would have footsteps up and down the main hallway. We'd have lights turned on and off. Doors would open and close and lock. In the middle of the night, doors would rattle like somebody's trying to get into your room. No, you could be the only person in the house. And this happened to me one time. It scared me so bad. I ran down the street to my mom's house after it happened. But I was waiting for my friend to get there. And I thought he had come in the house because I heard the door open and close, heard footsteps down the hall, the bathroom door open, the light turned on, the door shut. And then I thought my buddy's in there like, hey, man, what are you doing? And I go to pull on the door, is going to yell at him, and the door was locked. Well, I popped the lock on the door and it opened up and there's nobody in that bathroom, but the light was on. And so it startled me something fierce. And I ran down the road to my mom's house, stayed there. There'd been different knocking noises and stuff. And again, this is just like some of the things that happen in the house that happen so often. We've all living there, became accustomed to it. And it ended up kind of driving my like inspiration or interest into the paranormal. And and I think my dad ended up getting me the World News Weekly in a way to like help me like not be as scared, or just because when I first saw it, I thought it was some of the most entertaining material I'd ever seen in my life. Was the World News Weekly, the one that had like Bat Boy or Abraham Lincoln was brought back to life, and
Oh yeah.
it's considered the hot sheets from the Men in Black movies, but it was well before the Men in Black movies. So I thought that stuff was really neat. And then it wasn't until probably I was in 7th grade before I actually had what I'd consider my first encounter. Because like being in the house, that was just the house. It's like it's weird to say, but in a weird way, it was just a part of life. After you've been there so long, you experienced all these things, and then it's just like, okay, this is just my home. Well, during the summer, I'd stay at my friend's house a lot, and his house was right by a pipeline, like one of the underground pipelines that fuel and stuff go through. And the summer that I was ended up staying out there with them, they were redoing the pipeline, and so we'd have shenanigans out there and go roll tires into their holes and knock over the porta potties, just being belligerent teenagers. One night when we were sitting, we had already gotten all of our kicks in, and we're sitting by a little fire in his front yard. Probably you could see the road, and probably the street light you could see was maybe about 2 or 3. I'd say every street light's usually about 100 yards apart, and the one at the top of the hill was the only one that was on. And so from his driveway to that street light is probably about 100 yards. We're just sitting there by a fire and with his dog, and he always claimed it was a wolf dog, and I couldn't argue because I didn't know. So his wolf dog is a big dog and the pointy ears. So I never argued him on that, just because that's the only one I've ever known. I hadn't seen any other like it either. But while we're sitting there, it's probably about 1 or 2 in the morning. Underneath the street light, we see what looks like just a Grand Pyrenees. And since this is country area, you wouldn't be surprised if you see a Grand Pyrenees out there. Every now and again, there were just packs of dogs that roamed to and fro, and his wolf dog would go crazy at him. And he kept them on a logging chain too. And so he would always get at the end of that logging chain and go crazy when we're out there and we'd see these other dogs. Well, this time when we saw this, what we thought was a Grand Pyrenees, sitting under it, just was standing underneath the street light, just dog pose, just kind of trotting down. His dog just sat down and didn't react like it usually did. And we're like, this is weird. Why is he's not barking? Anyways, we're just kind of still just and back and forth. And this Grand Pyrenees, and then we're looking at it and we're watching it. And we're like, this thing is huge. What is this? He's like, oh, that must be the neighbor's dog, such and such out the way. And I'm like, I don't know, man. That's really big. Then all of a sudden he's like, no, that is really big. Well, and we watch it, and it gets down to about where its driveway, where the road meets his driveway. And this is still a good ways from us because we're way back up on this hill close to his house. And his driveway's probably, I don't know, another 50 yards up to the house. So we're a good distance away from this thing. And it's solid white. And it all looked like a dog. And then all of a sudden at the foot of his driveway, it stood up on its hind legs and started walking like it wasn't anything. By this time, I was scared out of my mind. We both probably did some sort of roll over and run back to his house with his dog with us, like he is holding the dog by the collar, and we were running back to his house and got back into his house. I didn't even bother try to look at anything past. Once I saw it walking on its hind legs, I knew it wasn't right. I didn't need to be around it. We went and locked his front door and quite literally hid under some blankets and things in his living room for the rest of the night until the sun came up. And that was actually the last time I stayed over there during the summer. And it was the strangest thing ever. And then what was even more odd, we tried to tell people around in the area if they'd seen anything like that. No, laughing, stop. Y'all are crazy. Y'all are out doing this, or y'all doing that. No, we pulled shenanigans, yes, but this was it was the weirdest thing I'd ever seen in my life. And I've still not seen anything like that since. But again, it just kind of fed in to the urge of looking more into the paranormal, looking more into the cryptid things, because it's like there's more than Bigfoot out there. There's more than what you're just told. And it's like, and the more I started looking and just talking to people afterwards, just for my own knowledge, right? And after that, years later, after I graduated high school and I had some jobs, I ended up joining the Navy. And that's the next. I heard a story from this guy I knew in the Navy, and it was the most terrifying thing I ever heard in my life. And what happened to him was he grew up in the swamps, I think, I want to say in like either Louisiana or Mississippi. And he is telling us to where how he lived in this swampy area with his parents until when he was like between 12 or 13, he came home one day and his parents were quite literally murdered in his house. Everything was tore up, claws, marks everywhere. His parents were literally torn apart, and he found them. And then he has ended up went to go live with his grandparents until he was old enough to join the military. And I'm like, and I was like, what? And this guy, when I talked to him, I was like, and he was like, yeah. It's like you could see him like reliving it when he's walking. He's like, man, it's terrifying. And they told me it's a black bear, and I'm like, it doesn't make sense. And that was probably the worst story I heard from somebody. But the more I just started just accruing these little nuggets of things, I never considered myself a researcher. I never considered anything like that. I just considered, I would just listen here and there and just catch the stories to people who were who would just talk. And I wouldn't even draw it out. Like probably 2 years ago when I was getting gas at a gas station, I was wearing this hat. And some old fella, he's like, I saw something like that in Florida one time. He's like, going past some watermelon fields. It had grabbed a pair of watermelons and took 2 steps and crossed the road. I'm like,
wow.
And so all these little things, and plus I read a lot of stuff about it, and I've also listened to a bunch of stories. I'm sure most of the people listening to your podcast have heard a majority of the stories I've heard, to where there's just little things that have always added up, but it's not necessarily, I don't know how to put it, but it's just always kept my interest to where I don't like getting into the wood. I live in the middle of the woods. So I quite literally live at the end of a dirt road, and we've had a kind of weird experience here a time or two, but my brothers hunt. My brother's a big game hunter. I grew up in a hunting family to where it's like, I know tracks. I know these, just, your basic deer tracks. My dad used to bear hunt. He took us all bear hunting, things like that. So it's like, these are things I'm familiar with, but I don't like going in the woods for any length of time unless it's sun's out. It's like, I'm very specific to where it's like these encounters I've had, they've kind of like put this bubble of like, I'm only going to go so far. If I feel something's not right, I don't mess with it. If I camp, I like to go to official campgrounds. I don't do a lot of things that I guess other people would. Like I have friends out here that go coon hunting like all the time. They'll ask like, hey, you want to go coon hunting? I'm like, nah, I'm good, But if they shot a deer or something, they want me to help them find it, I'll go out there with them and help drag it out. That's not a big deal, but I don't like spending extensive time in the woods just from that one encounter I had, and then hearing all the little bits of stories that I've heard, because there's other things. I'm absolutely convinced there's other things out in the woods that prove that we're not the apex. We're not the top of the food chain. We're not the top of the pecking order. And so it's like, and that's another reason, like I do like my Barry books, because it's like it's a lighthearted approach to where it's like you get in the woods, you do need to be careful. You need to be respectful. You need to know your surroundings, because there's always something bigger. There's always something badder than you out there. And
right.
And that's just how I look at it. And again, and it's not saying, oh, don't go in the woods or anything like, no. Everybody, right. You got to do what you got to do. But out of my risk assessment, I don't push it too far. So.
Now, real quick, I believe this may be somebody you might know, Logan and Motts.
Yeah.
Yeah, they say on here that I have seen Bigfoot once in this town, and they live about a mile from Freedom Farmstead.
Yes,
So,
yes.
okay. Yeah,
Well,
interesting.
no, I tell you I've not seen anything at my house. I've not seen any footprints or anything like that, but I have had a crazy encounter. There's this one thing we call the phantom donkey, which is hilarious to us because certain time of year, and we're on like a big, I'd call it necropolis for lack of better words, because we've had creeks on either side of us. And then we'll get coyotes run through here. We've even had wolves run through here. There's a difference in them. You can, I mean, if you know what coyotes sound like, and then if you've ever heard wolves, they're different. And so we've had those. We get owls, but one time we were out in our front yard, and it was probably about 5:30 in the afternoon, and it's in summertime. The owls get to chit chatting. You have one over on the one side from one creek bed, one to the other side. They're going back and forth. And then there's something that comes, and we're also real close to a swamp. We go play in the swamp every now and again within walking distance. Don't get more than a quarter mile or so from the house. But there's another owl sound come from the swamp. And then it changed. It went from just going hoo 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 to sounding like it was the primate exhibit at the zoo.
Oh,
Like,
wow.
it was so much so. My wife and I looked at each other. We got our boys. We went to the porch, and we have a 100-pound German Shepherd. We have a boxer. That's probably he's a boxer mix. He used to be the fiercest thing ever. Now he's retired, and he you know it. But those two, they didn't bark. They just sat in the porch and looked. And usually it's like they'll run a coyote, they'll kill raccoons, possums, you name it, they'll go after it. But this only happened once, but it was just so weird that it happened at all, to where I'm like, owls don't make that noise. And because have you ever heard a gibbon upset at the zoo to where they'll do that whoop 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 whoop?
No.
It sounded very similar to that. It wasn't screech, it was all like deep whoops. That it started as an owl noise, and then it did that, and I'm like, this just isn't right. But that happened probably like my wife would probably correct me if I'm wrong, but probably about 2 years ago now.
Oh, nice.
And what's also interesting is we ended up having some feral cats around here, and this is one of the things I swear by. It's that every so often we ended up, at one time the cats got in such a big population, there's about 20 of them. And then because I'm starting to think that there's something that migrates through here, and after there's about 20 feral cats running around, just too many in my opinion. But yet after there's like 1 week, there's probably about 5 left after that. Just they were gone.
Wow.
And now granted, the ones that would usually leave would be males, and they'd go to the end of a mile-long road and go see the other cats over there, but then they'd end up coming back because we were never mean to them. We'd just pet them like, all right, no, you're fluffy, you're this, you're that. And they were kind of like somewhat feral, but they just like literally, what was that? Like two-thirds or almost 3/4 of them disappeared. And then maybe 1 or 2 showed up later on, but those were the males, which to be expected of them. But all the other ones, is real weird. Oh yeah, I see what my wife put on there, and random knocks around here.
Yeah.
Now, and I have noticed there's a difference, because it's like we like, again, we live in the middle of the country. We get gunshots out here. We know gunshots. We know tannerite. We even had a guy that lived probably about a mile from us who had a cannon, and every now and again he'd give a little boom off of that. And then maybe about 5 miles off from us, there's a gun range, and you'll hear some doo 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 doo, but there's actual wood knockings during, I want to say, early spring and late fall.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's not the same as a gun, because it's got that whip of crack to it, and some of them get elaborate, and you're just like, what? And so I'm like, it's weird.
Yeah, I've heard consecutive knocks before out in the middle of the woods with my daughter when she was younger. And I was like, what? I was like, I'm listening to a parabolic mic with a headset on, it's like, and I look over. I just happen to glance down at her. She's sitting down at the log, and I look over and she's pointing. I take my headset off. I said, "What are you pointing at?" She said, "Daddy, I hear the knocks right there." I said, "What?" I didn't realize they were that close. But yeah, but they were like boom, 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 boom. They were consecutive knocks, like right there. And yeah, I was like, wow. So yeah, I am familiar with what that sounds like,
And
which is
it's
awesome.
but what's weird is like they don't the knocks never happened at night. Is always either early in the morning or right before dusk. And I saw that if somebody asked if we had trail cams out here, and we personally don't have trail cams. There's a fellow who owns 20 acres right around us, and he's got a bunch of trail cams out here. And about the only thing he's seen out here has been a black bear. And
Oh, okay.
we have those come because we're very close to the river. And when I say we're very close, straight through the woods, it's maybe a half mile. And if you get on the road, it's about 2 miles away. But
Okay.
swamp and what have you. And we've had huge packs of coyotes come through. And one time, and again, we're not supposed to have them, but I saw a black, like a black mountain lion or a black panther, whatever you want to call it, sit in my backyard and stare at me and my boys.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. We're not supposed to have them up here in Virginia, but I've seen one too in 2015. So, and that doesn't, and not to mention all the other eyewitnesses in the surrounding county. So I mean, they're here. Absolutely.
And this is a perfect environment for all sorts of things. We get huge owls, we get huge hawks and little falcons because we have a very lush environment. Just like we've just got an acre in the middle of lots of land. There's, like I said, there's 20 acres around us that a fellow on the road back behind us owns. Then there's like another 614 down here in front of us, which is a hunting property. And again, it's like I talk with these gentlemen. I'm like, hey, it's like we don't really do any hunting, but every now and again we like to do walks, just not too far from the house. And I'm like, no, y'all walk, you do whatever you need. Just let us know if anybody's out who's not supposed to be here. And so we just keep an eye out for things like that. But we just see, or we don't really see things that are odd. We hear things that are odd every so often and catch. Now, here's something really weird. Probably about halfway down our road, we have a creek, and it's just a regular running creek. And sometimes when we go down there, it is just the foulest smell ever. And it's like we'll go down, we'll check, see if it's the water. It's not the water; it just stinks. And then other times we go down there, it doesn't smell at all. It just smells like the dried leaves or whatever trees that we have that are in bloom or what have you. But it's that's very sporadic when that happens. But when it stinks, your windows can be rolled up in your car and you can notice like, it's like this creek area is stinking again. And this creek feeds directly into the swamp that feeds directly into the river.
I'm sorry. I was just going to ask because as I'm listening to what you're saying, and there's a couple thoughts that are coming to my mind. It's a flowing creek, so we know it's not stagnant water.
Yeah.
Now, how far is the swamp that you mentioned? How far is that from that area? The reason I'm asking that is, could you be catching wind of that?
It's possible because that swamp's maybe about an 80-yard walk from where that creek's flowing. Because how the road dips down and then the creek goes underneath the road because they put a storm drain in to where the road can get, because it used to be an easement road, and so then it turned into a county road, and we're the only ones at the end of it. But so there's just like this little piece that the creek runs through about 80 yards down. And when we go down to the swamp, when it doesn't smell, we'll go down to the swamp and we'll find turtles and things like that. And we found raccoon nests and just various different fun things and mess with crawdads and what have you. But when it stinks, we're like, we're not going to mess with it today. And then we'll just go back to the house. Because it's like, right. I have a weird theory about this, and it's because of a cat we had one time. We had this Siamese cat named Duke, and my cousin came over, and we were playing like some Xbox or something one night, and this cat, he obviously didn't want company. He comes in the room, passes gas so terrible that it causes us to leave. And to where I'm like, so in my mind, I'm like, wait a minute, what if there's some creature out here that's like knows that there's people around, doesn't want them close. So instead of like a skunk spraying, it just passes gas, and it's like it serves the same purpose. Because if you're eating wild things, you're eating this stuff, you're going to have a much more potent gas than something that eats processed foods. Or, and again, it's a theory. It doesn't mean that it's true or not. It's just something I take it as a warning, like it's not for us to be there. So, and then I also incorporate that with Barry, because that's one of Barry's fun chemical self-defense mechanisms. Passes gas to deter things.
No, that's very cool. But no, it's actually, well, some people believe, like other species, Bigfoot is able to put out some type of pheromone, or not a pheromone, but a defense mechanism like skunks do, not necessarily a spray, but, something through their pores or whatever. They're able to release something that, then on top of that, Bigfoot, a lot of times they have these distinct smells. I have not come across or experienced these smells, but some people say they can smell like wet dog, or what or a skunk, or possibly what the swamp gases might be putting out. So there could be a combination that Bigfoot could be having these smells that you could be smelling Bigfoot. We don't know, but I'm also curious, because now when the last few years I've been down in South Carolina, mainly this past year, I've gathered some stories from eyewitnesses that live in the surrounding area around Westminster. I'm just curious, from what you're experiencing and where you live, how far would you say you are from Westminster?
Hour and a half, 2 hours almost. Westminster's over there in the western part of the state. I'm in the upstate, probably about solid hour from Charlotte, North Carolina.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I drive right through there on the way home. Yeah.
So I'm on the outskirts of Spartanburg County, so where a couple river systems run through, like the Broad River and the Packlet River. So I'm in between those two, but I'm closer to the Packlet. And then, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to make mention. I got some real good friends of mine. You may have heard of them. They're out of North Carolina, the North Carolina Squatch Watchers. They do a lot of.
I've actually followed them on Facebook.
Oh, okay, yeah. They actually do a lot of investigations. They're out of Taylor Cook. He lives out of him and his wife live in Hickory, North Carolina.
Okay.
So yeah, they have because like I've been through Hickory and stayed not far from there when I went to the Western North Carolina Bigfoot Festival there a couple of years ago. But they cover a lot of areas. They have some private property where they get to investigate. But they do meet up with other people and work the surrounding areas throughout North Carolina. So, yeah, I was just curious, because that might be something they catch a lot of activity too. So that kind of gives me an idea of like where you're at and where they're getting their activity. There's a population there, perhaps.
Well, that's possible, and I tell you what. What's really, really got me thinking about what I only analyze things that I've looked into, and so I don't do any field research, because I don't want to come across something the size of the berry I made. I don't care how gentle. A giant like that is terrifying to me. But I suspect that when you have something like this, they might operate similar to how like the raccoons do here. And what I mean by that is raccoons don't have just one nest. They have dozens upon dozens nests, to where it's like, okay, and it's not even about a time of year. It's just like, we're going to go here this night. We're going to go here this next night, because we know we get this food, that we get this food here. And so they move all around to where the better the locations are, to where you're not going to see as much as a prominent nest, unless they're having like a big birthing center, which is easier to find with raccoons. But if they're just doing all just kind of nesting and not birthing, it's less likely, unless you have some good dogs, you're not going to find them. And
right.
And that's what I kind of think they might do, because if you've got, instead of migratory, they could be nomadic. And during just moving around, it's like, okay, I'm familiar with this large tract. I know what food I can get here or there. Again, these are little things that I like to want to incorporate with my children's books too, because Barry's always on the move in them. And it's just one of these little things that I think, but it doesn't mean it's necessarily true, because for all I know, they could be hiding down there by the river right now underneath one of the big, in one of the caves out here, that we have in this area.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a theory of Bigfoot. I mean, that they live underground, and when I say underground, it could be cave structures that some of them we might not even be aware of that are around. Like in my main research area here in Virginia, there's hundreds of thousands of acres of the national forest, and as to my knowledge, there's no well-known populated. Well, I shouldn't say even populated. I mean, there is a lot of caves. I've seen and found a few small little caves, but I believe there's a bigger cave structure somewhere out there that I have not discovered, or as far as I know, no one else has either. But yeah, that's interesting. But I do believe, and I know a lot of other people probably agree to that they do live underground. And to me, it would make a lot of sense to a lot of things, as far as the way they hide.
Well, that's something I also have looked into is cave systems. With all the cave systems that are in the United States right now, over 90% of them have not been explored. And
right.
So when you have a number that vast, it's like, well, you don't know what's living in them, and you don't know how far they go, especially when you have, if you start looking into things like maybe up here at the Linville Caverns. Those are huge areas. Now it's an attraction, but think about things like that are undiscovered, that you have these big open pockets that have water sources and ways in and out. And then you have a creature that, even if it's just between 6 and 7 foot, but being as muscular and strong as it's described, it could easily move one of those vast rocks in front of something, just push it out enough to where they can get out and come back in and pull it shut. Something like in the movie The Croods, how they.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And again, these are just like little things that when I try to incorporate these things when I'm thinking about with Barry Bigfoot again. And one of the fun things is, it's like I've heard a bunch of stories about people, usually rural people, talk about how they've got a Bigfoot that come and look through their window. And that's kind of what this guy's was inspired by, to where it's like I drew a picture of him on my tablet looking through a window. I'm like, you know what? And then we found this frame at a Goodwill. I'm like, I'm gonna paint a Barry looking through the window. And so again, everything I start like learning about Bigfoot, I always try to bring it back towards like the children's books, to where it's like it makes it fun, but yet you can still just pick up these little nuggets of things. It's like, wait a minute, I remember seeing that somewhere, and hopefully somebody else can pick up something. It's like, hey, well, I know this. If this happens, it could mean this, and so forgive me, I'm kind of getting off on a tangent there, but.
Oh no, you're totally fine. Absolutely, you're good to go. Yeah.
Now, I am curious, and it's like, I've seen you've done a lot of Bigfoot research, but have you ever found where you're going and you find like a solid trail of prints, and then all of a sudden the prints stop out of nowhere?
Well, it's funny that you bring that up. I mean, I have found short trackways in the past. However, it depends on, the trackway I found was in a soft soiled area that had some leaf litter. However, where they went into the grass, and of course this grassy area was you couldn't really leave an imprint there. It was a little firmer, a little bit more firm. However, I believe that's the case with a lot of species, and not just Bigfoot, because you hear and I see people's comments when people post a picture of a track, and yeah, a lot of them are just single tracks. And I question it a lot, but then I got to remember, wait a minute, I find single tracks too. And then what eventually made sense to me was one time when I was walking through a clearing, a power line clearing that was in the middle of the woods. Well, it ran through the woods, and I'm looking there, and all of a sudden I see this nice, massive looking bear track. I mean, undeniably, it was a very clear bear track. And then all of a sudden, like, I'm looking for the rest of the tracks, and I was like, duh, a light turned on, and I was like, I'm stepping here, I'm leaving an impression, but when I step over here, I'm not leaving an impression. And I'm about,
Right.
I don't know, last time I weighed myself, it's been a while, maybe 230, 240, give or take, But so it depends on the surface of the terrain. I mean, some areas might be soft, some areas might be spongy, some might be just firm. So depends on what the subject is, if it's a big bear or a heavy Sasquatch. I really believe it depends on what they're walking on and where they're walking. So, and besides that, it's believed that Bigfoot, depending on their height and their length of legs, they have a very large or long gait with their walk. So, I mean, to me, that makes sense why a lot of tracks only appear to be so long and then seem like they don't go nowhere. I know I've heard maybe once somewhere along the lines there was a trackway in snow somewhere out, maybe in the Blue Mountains out in Washington State or whatnot. That there was a trackway that had stopped. I don't know. I mean, I've heard something like that at one point in time, but I believe in most cases, yeah, it's got to be the terrain that they're walking on. And then again, some people believe they might go up in a tree or do some, or maybe they start running and when they run, their gait is even longer. So that's things I think about.
Sense too, or even think about if you've ever had to run and then you start taking leaping bounds just to pick up more distance from behind whatever it is you're running from. And so,
right. So David, Melissa's husband, says you need to come to our camp out. So yeah, he said you and your wife need to come. He said so. So, I mean, most of the people that are there are couples. I mean, David and Melissa. Then I got my friend Gwendolyn and her husband Michael. So, yeah. Unfortunately,
we're not
trying
to invite any Sasquatch directly to it. It might not be a problem, but like I said, I mean, I'm only like 5'8". I don't want to have something come pick me up like I'm a little rag doll. Like, hey, look at me, It's just because, and that's something else I've always considered with Bigfoot because I've tried to talk to people about it, and they're like, oh, if Bigfoot exists, they'd be living in our society if they were that smart. I'm like, wait a minute. I don't want to live in this society a lot of days. I'd much rather be out in the woods. What are you talking about? Just to be away from all this nonsense. But then again, it's like, well, why don't they see him more on trail cams? Why don't they see him here? And then, something that kind of crosses my mind is like, you have something that is born and raised or lived its entire existence in the woods, in wilderness. Don't you think that it has the possibility to not only smell, sense, or pick up on the things that we go out in the woods? Because no matter how quiet we think we are, we're not that quiet in the woods.
Right. Yeah, you're right. Absolutely.
We smell tremendously to them in the woods. And again, this is coming from a hunting family perspective. Like, it doesn't matter what scent mask you use. You're just putting on extra perfume to where it's going to have something else. It's like, oh, that smells like human and fox urine, extra strength,
Right. Yeah.
And so these are things that I don't think people consider. And then I also believe there's the possibility. It's like, okay, you have a lot of animals can see in the infrared and in even the UV spectrums. Well, a lot of the trail cameras, they actually use the infrared light to pick up game animals at night. And you'll notice there's smarter predator animals that there's some that don't care about it, but then there's other ones that have never seen it before. And you'll see them stand all the way back to the back of like right as far as the light can see, and you'll see their eye shining. It's a cat,
Mm-hmm.
It's a coyote that's not seen that before, and they're staying just out of that light just because they don't know what that light is. Even if there's a bait there, they're like, why is that shining right now? and you can see that in some, and there's others that have just grown accustomed to. It's like, no, they just want a picture, or they're showing us where this food is,
Yeah.
And so,
yeah,
you'll have that, but it's real neat that you have all these different perspectives, and I find it hilarious at times when people are like, no, there's no way these things can exist, and I'm like, have you been outside? Do you know what's actually in the woods to say what can and can't exist? You do realize gorillas weren't discovered until the 1950s, and once somebody killed them and placed them,
right.
It's like, why is it that there's actual laws that it's illegal to harm or molest Bigfoot or Sasquatch in certain states? Why is there national parks that are set aside just for Sasquatch? There's lots to, and again, these are all things that help drive the little stories I have. Do you remember a few years back, there was a little boy who was gone for like 3 days. He went off from
it happened. Yep, that was North Carolina, was it?
Yeah.
Yep. The little boy said well, they tried to say it was a bear. Oh, the little boy said it was a bear. But yeah, go ahead. I know. Yeah.
And that was one of the things that really is like, he's off in the woods. There's like freezing rain and stuff. But when they found him, he had like a couple little scratches from briars and stuff, but he's completely dry. He is warm. And they're like, well, how this happened? And all he could, like you're saying, all he could say was a bear, and it stood over him, what have you. I've never known bears to have that sort of instinct towards humans, because if they find a little human, it's like you hear stories like in India of children being raised by wolves, but you don't get stories like that about bears. And if the bear did it, where was the bear? Where were the tracks? Where was the scat? How did this little boy not end up start having issues with dehydration or being, you can go several days without eating, but he wasn't necessarily starving when they found him either. So not only was he kept warm, he was kept
right
safe during this time. So, and again, I feel like that's kind of like one of the circumstantial evidences that add towards these things. And then if you start going way down this rabbit hole, you have people like David Paulides, who ended up finding DNA samples and going in. And have you read any of his books to where he had FBI sketch artists, and the people who would give their testimonies would actually have to sign affidavits to be in his books? So it's like, okay, you can face legal prosecution if we find out you're lying about any of this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm familiar with his books, but I have not read any of his books. But yeah, real quick, I just want to make a brief mention about about the little boy and the claim of a black bear. I actually, when that was going on, when kind of floating around social media, I actually, what's the word I'm looking for? I actually made a blog about it in my blog. WordPress blog site, and one of the things I mentioned too, because and I brought this to people's attention, it's something to think about. I mean, he was 3 years old, and the thing is, here's another thing. I mean, being that young, I mean, bear was probably the only animal species that he was able to say that he could recognize. I mean, what 3-year-old, unless you train them and teach them about Bigfoot? I mean, my 2-year-old grandson, he'll be 3 in June, but he's learning what Bigfoot is. All the Bigfoot stuff on my wall here, every time he comes in my room, he points at it and goes, "Rawr," But the other thing is too, it's an instinct for a bear to be skittish of a human.
Especially
they're
black
not
bears.
Right, exactly. I've had a lot of encounters myself with black bears. They're very skittish and shy. They don't want to be bothered. They're usually going in the opposite direction when they smell and notice you. But
even brown bears to a certain extent. Years ago, my wife and I, we went to Lake Tahoe, and we're walking down the path, and we woke up. I'd say a 2 or 3 year old bear who had just separated from its parent, its mama, and it's sleeping in the woods by itself. And we were loud enough and woke it up. It's poked its head up and all startled, scared my wife to where she's about to take off running. I'm like, no, stay. You break your arms up. You scare it because he's startled now. We got to commit, you know. So luckily he ended up getting scared of us and he ran up the hill. But that was even the brown bears and the brown bears that I've encountered that aren't skittish of people. They just don't mind you. They really don't want anything to do with you, but they don't really care. And those were the ones that were around Tahoe that were going through trash cans and knocking over things and just doing whatever they wanted and daring somebody to tell them not to.
Yeah.
But they weren't like the kind, but those were the same kind that you could go, ha, 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 or have a dog bark at them and they'd start running. It's like they wouldn't charge. And also on that same trip, I played paintball up on the top of this mountain, and there is this mama bear with 2 cubs, and the guy who was leading the paintball game, he came out there with his paintball gun just tagged up the ground in front of him, shooting up dirt in front of it, and it scared this big brown bear with 2 cubs off the course, and it left and didn't bother us the rest of the time. And he's like, look, he's like, you can scare them, but you don't shoot them. You shoot them with the paintball guns, they get pissed off and they'll come at us. But if you shoot them, they get startled and run away. So,
right. Yeah, like there's a comment right here. It's funny that he says this right here. Black bears are the most dangerous bear there is. Well, honestly, I believe, first of all, I beg to differ. Native Americans would definitely disagree with that. Statistics would disagree with that. Native Americans, for example, look at black bear versus the grizzly as good versus evil, or in a spiritual sense, which they look at all known species of animals in a spiritual sense.
Yep.
The black bear is the good spirit, and the grizzly or the brown bear being the bad evil spirit. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there real quick. I don't know. I mean, like I said, I've done a lot of research and study on black bears because I do a lot of the data that I collect out in the field is not just on Bigfoot. Black bears is something I specialize in among all the other among all the other wildlife species. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there real quick. So,
I mean, definitely you'll have everything's in a bell curve in my opinion, to where you'll have your large majority of black bears to be usually skittish, but then you always have your outliers to where you might have one massively big bull or something once every, I don't know, 5-6 generations that ends up being a little more aggressive. But I don't think a black bear would ever compare to like some of the big grizzlies or anything like that, especially the ones that my brother was telling me about when he's been, because he does big game hunting out in Idaho and the Montana area, and he's telling me about some of the stuff that he's seen out there. And I get on him all the time. I'm like, hey, you see any Bigfoot stuff? And he's like, oh, man, I don't even look for that. He's like, there's enough things for me to worry about with the grizzlies coming into season and all. I don't need to worry about some giant thing that I don't know its intention. He's like, I'm more worried about the grizzlies out here than Bigfoot. I'm like, all right, well, if you see something, send me a picture because I want to see it. It's like I always felt like he was my inside guy out there because it's supposed to be out in the Rocky Mountain area to where they're supposed to have more of the, I guess, the traditional patty style sightings.
Right. And see, something you just said regarding your buddy there, he's not looking for it.
Oh no, he's not. And that's my brother who does this.
Yeah. And now see, a lot of people, skeptics and non-believers, they're like, like I'm referring to other hunters and hikers that don't believe in Bigfoot unless they've experienced it, whatnot. A lot of them are like, well, I'm out in the woods. I never see the tracks. I never see the evidence. And exactly what you said and what I tell people, they're not looking for it. If you're not looking for it, of course you're not going to find it unless it's something very clear and obvious in front of your face. But people like me and other researchers that go out actually looking for the evidence. Yeah, I mean, we don't come across it all the time, but it's found, it's noticed, So,
well, I have a question for you that I've just been stewing on ever since you told me I could come and talk to you. What do you think Bigfoot is? Like, do you think it's a primate? Do you think it's a tribe of people? Just like, what, if you had to say, what would you think it is?
In my honest opinion, and I know a lot of people will agree, but then again, a lot of people do not agree. But then again, they don't agree because I'll explain. first of all, in my honest opinion and belief, and as of right now, with my research, with my conclusion, I believe they are some type of primate, undiscovered, unclassified primate. And when I say that, I'm not saying they're a gorilla, I'm not saying they're a chimpanzee, and et cetera, et cetera. But I believe that they are uh, a species of their own at the same time. Now, there's people that say they're not a primate, they're a type of human. Here's a contradiction in that. Scientifically speaking, we're human primates. And then you have your non human primates.
Mm-hmm.
And it's believed and studied and observed that some of these tracks, even handprints that we are believing that are Bigfoot, have been found that they have dermal ridges on their hands and
I've
even
seen that.
ridge lines.
Mhm.
And there's only two species in the entire world that we know of that have them: primates, human and non-human primates. A lot of the activity, the vocalizations, and everything that we contribute and relate to Bigfoot behaviors, uh, whether that's the vocalizations that we hear, the tree knocks, um, some of the odd found formations, rock stacks. Yeah, some of that can be contributed to people, but let's look at the behaviors and patterns of our non-human species of primate. They've been observed doing and creating and vocalizing everything that we contribute here. They're doing it there in their own neck of the woods. There is a similarity when you do a cross comparison, which I like to point out in a lot of my presentations when I go to events. And all I'm doing is trying to get people to think and consider where my point of view, and but that's basically a summed up, explanation of how I look at it.
Well,
So
that makes sense, especially that there's a type of chimp that was separated from larger, larger groups of species. It's somewhere in Africa. I want to say it's the Bogo, or it's a Bogo chimp, I think is the name of it. I'm not exactly sure, but what makes this chimp different is that because during the time of civil war in this country, it was being killed just like the anybody out who was out in the area. It's everything was being gunned down indiscriminately. So this chimp ended up becoming nocturnal and avoiding humans at all costs. And it ended up having some slight adaptation changes, and its behaviors changed altogether to where it won't be. It's a very hard chimp to find out in the wild. And again, they'll have them in zoos and things now, but it's only after they set off very specific expeditions to go and hunt them and to find them and to put them into captivity.
yeah, I think you're referring to the bonobo.
The bonobo, that's it. That's
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
And so, and that gives credence to that. And so, if you tie that thought process into like, okay, well, what has been happening in the United States during its history? Well, you have the Revolutionary War. You have before that, you had warring tribes of Indians depending here and there, but that's before the firearms. And you bring the firearms over with the Revolutionary War. Then you have the War of 1812, the French and Indian War. And you have all these different wars, and then you have the Great American Expanse across the West with all these different types of revolvers and repeaters and things like that, to where it ends up even to like the the more northern tribes that had their idea of the forest people of like the Janasqua, which is like the stone skin one.
the stone giants.
So they level the
Yeah.
playing field with all these repeating rifles and things that would throw these rocks a lot faster, and so it's like, okay, wait a minute, this isn't like these guys that's in some places they claim they traded with, or we could give food or share area. No, they were throwing arrows and spears. Now they're throwing rocks with thunder, and so now we learn to avoid these things all together, and we can go into either these caves, or we can go in deeper into the forest where they can't go, or where they won't go, rather to say, in large groups. And if they do, it can be easily taken care of either by the environment itself, or by, again, like you start looking more into the Janasquas, where they were the ones that would pop heads off people. And again, this has been a hobby of mine to look into like some of the different Native American legends and things, and even so much so to where different areas they attribute different attributes to some, to where some of them that I've seen, and again, maybe this ties into the dog man, to where how the behaviors change, to where you have some that are just kind of like, just leave us alone. If you see us, we're out. And then you have some that will end up growling, showing teeth, showing signs of aggression, and will come and give some sort of retaliation, either on your property or doing things to intimidate, I'd say in a similar style of how gorillas do with their bluff charges. And if you react to that bluff charge, well, it's game on with the gorilla. They're just, that's a creature that's 15 times the strength of a normal human. And so you've got something that's much bigger than that, that's been encroached upon. And then if you responded poorly to its bluff charge, that might be why there's missing 411. But again, that's a large speculation to go into this topic also. So,
oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I once learned, I have to look into it again to be sure, but it was stated that a gorilla compared to a grizzly would outdo the grizzly by strength. So,
by main strength, they're insanely strong. I think it's when you have a chimp compared to a human, it's like a chimp is 3 times as strong, and then a gorilla it's astronomical. I could be wrong. I know it's somewhere close to like 15 times as strong as a human. And so it's just, but then, okay, let's say this is some sort of undiscovered primate. Maybe it's in the Gigantopithecus family. I don't know. But it could be something, an offshoot, somewhere around in there. Well, then you amplify that strength, and then you start getting into this territory of these different tree breaks of like 4-inch, 5-inch poplars, pines, oaks, and things that are either twisted, and you have and these things are and the breaks, they're not low. It's not like you've got a boar or a buck doing it where they're just rubbing it, or even a grizzly doing it to where they're just marking it. It's like these are literally twisted or broken up high enough, anywhere from 5 to 7 feet up in the air, to where it's broken. And it's different because you have the level of strength that it would take to break these trees. And then also the reports of some of these same size trees are flipped upside down and stabbed into the ground with the root system that being exposed up top. And again, I haven't witnessed this personally. I've read about these, and it's just from the different things that I've read about people witnessing things, or even I did see a video once where there was a set of loggers who were working somewhere, and it's power line workers, and right on the backside of this fence where they were working on, something through a tree. And it was like, I don't know how, is a huge looking tree. And when I say huge, like how long it was, and when they went to look at it, is something like a 7-inch in diameter tree. So you got to think something this big around, and something lobbed it up over them, and they were able to catch it on video of this tree flying in the air. And it just kind of reminds me of like the amount of strength these things would have, to where it's like, if some of these just wanted to press or take advantage of any sort of situation, there's not much we could do other than try to run.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I've heard stories about people having logs or small trees being thrown at them. But it's not often I've heard of those kind of things. I hear more of rocks being thrown,
like little pebbles and things like that.
Well, but I myself, several years ago, have in the daytime hiking up a trail out in the middle of the forest. I wasn't alone, but I had a football-sized stone thrown at me, and the girl I was dating at the time was with me. It landed right between us. Yeah. We were walking along the trail. We had to cross a creek to continue with the trail continued to. As soon as we got up to the other side and continued on that trail, we had just started, and then boom, this big old stone just lands right between us. Yeah, we didn't see nothing, but somewhere looking back, on the other side, we tried to look to see if we saw what through that. We never saw nothing because it was real thick, a lot of heavy mountain laurel and bushes through there. But we did hear like a woo type sound in the background, which was like, okay. I didn't want to admit to her, but I was a little nervous. I was like, come on, stay close to me, you know? And at that time, I might have only had like a Bowie knife. I didn't have the sidearm, which I always carry a sidearm with me now, but you know, so
this is one of the things to where it's like, forgive me for this opinion. However, I think doing field research and looking for a Sasquatch is probably the silliest thing that you could possibly do. Like, I worked a flight deck in the military, so that's supposed to be like one of the top 5 dangerous jobs in the world. I don't think it is compared to going out and trying to do field research to find a Bigfoot. When they can throw rocks at you, I mean, throwing like little pebbles to get your attention is one thing, but a football-sized rock. I have some rocks right around my house that are kind of rounded in shape that I've dug up out of the ground. And these things easily weigh, and I have one about like this that me and my sons will go pick up, and we'll just kind of throw it, just see how far we can do it for exercise and what have you. This thing weighs about 20 pounds. And so like a football size rock, if that were to hit your foot, your leg, it's broken. It's that is just, oh man. Have you ever had a time when you went out and you're doing field research and you're heading down a path or something, and then part of like there was a tree knocked down on your way either in or out?
I believe I recall one incident a long time ago. I went up this, it was an old log road that went into the woods. I noticed when I came back out, there was this probably about maybe a 2.5, 3 inch round pine tree that was like, it looked like it got pushed down going over the trail. It was noticed on the way out, but not on the way in. So it made me be like, okay, something saw me come in here, you know? I mean, that's what I thought. That's the thought that ran through my head. I was like, unless there was somebody else here messing with me, which, I mean, I don't know. But I could recall that one time, basically. So, but
now, how do you feel about people that gift like Bigfoot apples or trinkets or things like that?
Gifting, that's another thing I've spoken on. I believe it's a fun experimental idea. Now, when it comes to food, I think food can be very dangerous, in my honest opinion.
Yes.
For a couple reasons. You do not want to habituate any wildlife that you don't want coming around your area. Because especially food, if you start leaving food and you notice, okay, something's taking it, and then you stop doing it, whatever was enjoying that food is going to come looking for it and smell where it came from. Then you may have some unwanted visitors. The other thing is, the food that we're normally able to digest and eat without problems. Well, here's the other thing you have to consider is, do they, when I say they, Bigfoot or whatever wildlife might be eating that food, they could have an allergic reaction. So are we causing more harm than good? That's something I get people to think about, you know. Now, as far as leaving trinkets and other objects, I think that's probably the safest or the best bet. I know I've done it before. I know some others have done it before. They'll build their own stick structure and to see if it gets interacted with. I myself, I've done a rock stack before. And there's one rock stack I've done. I would go back every 2 to 3 weeks to check on it. One time when I returned to it, there was maybe it was just a coincidence, I don't know, but there was a very large turkey feather laying right in front of it. And so I took advantage of that turkey feather. That top stone, I took the top stone off, laid the feather on top, and placed the stone back on top of it to hold it there. It was heavy enough to where the wind won't blow it out of there. Come back 2 weeks later. I came back 2 weeks later. That top rock was on the ground, and the feather was laying back in front of the rock stack.
That's
so
weird.
There was, there was definitely some interaction there. I mean, I can't say a Bigfoot did it. I mean, although I want to believe so, but I didn't witness it. So, just like a lot of other people that say they do these gifting things, or unless they're witnessing what's interacting, a lot of them tend to believe or just go along and say Bigfoot did it. But I'm not one of those people. I got to be a little bit more grounded, a little bit more logical, if that makes any sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. Now, have you ever found Bigfoot scat? And if so, do you think they're omnivore, herbivore, or carnivore?
I can't say I've ever come across Bigfoot scat, although it's funny when it comes to a lot of species of scat, wildlife species, anywhere from coyote to bear. I actually tend to poke the poop, if you want to say that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I understand. I do that every now and again, like, because like what I said before, it's like we go on little walks not far from the house, not any, like, because we got little creeks on either side of us, and we'll go down there, and for some time there, we had this pile of like soft dirt in this dried creek bed right before you get to the other part of this creek, and it had a tremendous cat odor, like straight cat urine, but it wasn't from any cats around here, and it didn't have any scat in it, but a little bit farther away you could see scat, and I'm like, oh, I'd get a stick. I'm like, what is this? Who did this one? And it ended up, I think it ended up being like a bobcat that would come through here.
Right. Yeah, the coyote scat. A lot of you'll find deer and other small animal like rabbit fur and whatnot in it. Sometimes little bones. Bear scat. Now, bear scat. A lot of people don't realize a lot of bear scat really doesn't not have much of a smell to it, and it varies in in presentation. As far as sometimes bear scat will be sometimes in clumps, but a lot of times it will look like a cow patty. Depends on what its diet was. And then sometimes I'll find it in big piles, like football size piles, and yeah, I'll take a stick, I'll poke through it. And as far as, in my honest opinion, bear scat is probably one of the cleanest scats out there, besides maybe deer or whatnot. But a lot of times you'll find the seeds and the berries because that's their part of their main diet. And then in some rare cases, yeah, I have seen crawfish, crustaceans, and bear scat, and maybe a few small bones. Yeah. But now, as far as Bigfoot, this is where I do a comparison. I believe that there is a similar diet with Bigfoot compared to bears. Therefore, I believe they are omnivores, where they both eat both meat and vegetation. Black bears, their main diet is basically 80% vegetarian, 20% meat. They're also an opportunist. But in a Bigfoot, I tend to believe that their diet is almost the opposite percentage, where they probably eat 80% meat, 20% vegetarian. You know what I mean? So then again, it could vary. It could be more of a 50-50 deal, but it depends on what's available for them, what they have access to. So, but yeah, again, it's similar. I believe it to be similar. So yeah.
Now, when it comes to their intelligence level, how intelligent would you find them to be, considering the field research that you do? I mean, would you think that they would be smart enough to, like how some creatures like a sloth would bury their scat? Do you think that they'd go that far?
I tend to believe that they have an intelligence probably almost smarter than us, as far as, because I mean they're great survivalists. I'll put it that way. I mean, look, they've remained elusive to the public population, although there's eyewitnesses. We do see them. Now, as far as their intelligence, I believe, and I don't know how many other people might believe this, but I believe as far as they're dead, I believe they bury their dead. Among other practices here and there. And that's where I'll go back to where I do a comparison to our known species of primates. They have been observed burying their dead, which is very rare, because in most cases, a lot of our known species of primates, especially chimpanzees, for example, when one dies, they'll actually take that dead remains, they'll drag it along with them for weeks till they decide to dispose of it. But I don't think that's the case with Bigfoot. I think Bigfoot's either going to bury it, mourn it, or we don't know. They could be cannibalistic. Which in most cases people believe that. Right.
That's what I was going to ask. I was like, would you think that they'd be cannibalistic? Or now, when it comes to the Bigfoot, now this is one of the things that I've been thinking that I'm trying to again work into the books is like different types of Bigfoot, like subspecies and things like that, or not necessarily subspecies, but different. Kind of like how in primates you have the chimp, then you have the gorilla, then you have a baboon. And would you consider, or do you think that there are different types of Bigfoot similar to that, to where that's why you see some that might have are described with a snout, or some with the cone head, or some with a smaller head similar to ours? Or have you run into any of things like that in your research?
I honestly believe that. Well, for example, as far as size goes, look at the different areas and the reported sightings. And then again, we can't take this as anything factual because, a lot of people misidentify or misinterpret when it gives to given a height or possibly even descriptions. We don't know how accurate some of these descriptions are, but again, that's where we have to take things with a grain of salt.
Yes.
But the Pacific Northwest, even Alaska, you hear reports of them ranging any from 10 feet on up or whatever, give or take. Down south, they seem to be a little shorter. Based off of what I've seen here in Virginia and gathering other reports from eyewitnesses, 7 to 8 foot seems what the reported average height is here on the East Coast. Again, that could vary. And I believe a lot of it has to do with the genes, the diets, the location. Now, as far as what you're asking, the descriptions of the types of Bigfoot, I believe there are several different types. And just like us humans, this would be a good example. Look, we got Asian people, and we got people from different parts of the globe. And the Asians tend to be a smaller species. Then in other regions, you might have a larger genes of humans. That's tends to be a little bit thicker bone, and I believe that's the case with Bigfoot. Now, you mentioned one of the things you mentioned, baboon. Baboon is actually considered, not an actual ape because they have the tail. Yep. Although, if you want to include them with the different varieties of other apes, I believe that a lot of them may resemble some of them.
Well, that's why I brought that up, because you have now, again, this is going to kind of tie into the Dogman thing, to where you have some that have been described with snouts or with different style ears and what have you. But then it reminds me of this creature from Madagascar known as a fusa, which is more closely related to a weasel than a cat, yet it looks like a cat. And so you have, and it's just the matter of adaptation for it to look this way in order for it to hunt the specific style of food source. And that's what led me into this question, because this has been one of these topics that's been very hard for me to get to talking to. So thank you for letting me ask all these questions, because a lot of this stuff is kind of like things that I've already been kind of pondering on. But you're an actual field researcher, and I've not honestly got to talk to a field researcher ever before. And so I'm just hitting you with all these questions that I've had about it.
Oh, yeah, I have no problem at all. But let me make a quick mention. Are you familiar with Lyle Blackburn?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Now, Lyle Blackburn, he's a great author. He's a great cryptozoologist. He's been in this a lot longer than I have. But this past year, I got to speak at an event with him. And I listened to his presentation, and I was actually refreshed to hear somebody like him say this. And I know a lot of people are not going to agree with this, but when I heard him say this, I've already believed it, but to hear him say it was kind of refreshing. But in his honest opinion, when it comes to Dogman, when people claim to have seen a Dogman, he believes it's a misidentification of people are seeing some type of Bigfoot.
It's very, I think that's very possible. Or,
we can't prove it, but it seems like that's a good possibility,
Well, see, this is I've had a lot of like again, this is one of the topics that I look into because these are the topics that give inspiration to the children's books that I write. And so when it comes to Dogman, I have a couple considerations, and one of them that I've thought that it's could be some type of something from the Bigfoot family, or it could be what we considered a dire wolf, which is allegedly went extinct. And since we never had full exposure to dire wolves, we don't know their capability. Or then you have then once you start listening to people's like, well, it stood up, it had like these fingers or what have you. Well, then it starts sounding like something out of the polecat family, like a raccoon or an opossum with a different hip system, a slightly different hip system in the back, just a very large one, because they're the ones that have the opposable thumbs and they can make various types of noises and things that are attributed to it as well, or even some sort of massive feline at the same time that we've not had. Because, and again, it's like when you have these results talks about Dogman, the one thing that doesn't set right with me with it is like I've never honestly seen a consistent solo dog. Not, it doesn't matter if it's domestic, it doesn't matter if it's a Yodi, it doesn't matter if it's a wolf. They all end up running with some sort of pack, some sort of group. And the Dogman sightings, like almost every one I've ever heard about was always a single one. And the only things that get solitary like that I've noticed is you're going to have your solitary Bigfoot experience, or if you start talking about cats. Cats, you don't see cougars or mountain lions in packs. They don't go
Right.
You'll have the mother keep the young around for a little while, and after that, you're off or you're fair game. And that's kind of that. But then you have now there have been reports of Bigfoot that would they're thought to be either in troops or they would have like their scouts or their guards off to hide the rest of them. But and very very rarely you would hear of a mother carrying a young or something. But it was never the ones that have like this snout like look to them, and it's like they weren't. It was like a different type, but yet it was still upright and it could walk on all fours. And again, and it makes me think of like the baboon type mindset, because baboons can walk on their hind legs. They just don't. They get around easier on their all fours. They can run a lot faster that way. And again, it kind of sounds like an oversized type of baboon style creature. But again, this is all speculation, and it's just something that really makes me think about when you start getting in these cryptids. Like we're not going as far as the lizard man, like South Carolina's had their sightings there too, which is, I think that's an awesome thing to look into. But it's different when you start getting into the primate idea of Bigfoot, because again, it's you've got all these different ranges, and if you start looking through all the southern states, even from Virginia down to Florida, over on into Mississippi, and even into Texas, there's a lot of swamp, boggy land. There's a lot of this area, and again, this would cause them. You would have something totally different to have to adapt to versus what you would have in the Pacific Northwest or even in Alaska or Canada, because of the terrain. And like you said, you've got reports of them being shorter, and a lot of the dogman type creatures that I've heard stories and read into, it's come from this swampy looking area. And so again, it's like, is it really a dog? Is it really that? Or again, like you're saying, it's like, is it this misidentified creature it's more closely related to Bigfoot?
Right. Absolutely. There was something I was going to bring up that you mentioned, but I'm sure it'll come back to me. Um, but yeah, swamps. Yeah, you're right. I mean, here in Virginia, we got the Dismal Swamp, which is a very large swamp. I've never visited the area, but we've had reports from there. Yeah, most of the swamps here, I guess a lot of them run closer to the eastern side of the states. And then, but yeah, South Carolina. Yeah, my first year going down there, I stayed with some friends and I camped out on their property. They got a swamp off the edge of their property that we went to go investigate and check out. And because they were showing me a lot of the wildlife sign where they have a lot of wild boars down there. And yeah, we were going through an area that had a lot of thick and heavy bamboo, and that bordered the swamp area, which was very interesting. Oh man, I wish I could remember what I was going to say. I should have wrote it down. That's why I keep my notepad next to me. But no, interesting.
Well, sorry,
Yeah,
I got off on a tangent. I mean, I know I was
Oh,
talking about children's books and stuff before. It's like, but this has always been a topic I've been very, very passionate about. Something that I've researched a whole lot. There's been times I've talked about it so much that my wife is like, "Babe, I know what you've told me. I know your theories." It's like, but I've got other things I need to do right now. And I'm like, "Oh, okay, well."
No, you're a lot like me though, because like on podcasts where I'm the guest being interviewed, I'll get asked a question and I'll explain the question, but I get very random the way I explain. I'll start off explaining something, then I'll jump to something else for an illustration or to make a point. Then I'll come back and say, well, okay, this is why I was talking about that, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I'll kind of go back and forth a lot. I can't help it. That's how I am. I've always been that way. But, I think it's maybe a lot of people don't understand that, but I think it's a very healthy way to be because there's so much on your mind too. You can't help but unload it,
Yeah.
So yeah,
I totally can relate with this.
Absolutely. So as I tell people too, before I even get on the podcast, I'm very random. Or when I go to speak somewhere. I got a presentation which keeps me on track, but I still tend to go off track and talk about other things, but that are not on my presentation. That's just how I am.
So being on random, and it's like, but at least I'm keeping it to the Bigfoot topic. So there's this. And what do you think about the people who claim to speak telekinetically to Bigfoot?
I have a lot of friends and other people I've met along the way that believe in that. I'll put it to you this way. I've never experienced no such thing. And it doesn't mean, who knows? It could happen somewhere down the line if that is real, if Bigfoot or something is capable of doing such a thing. So I tend not to believe in it because I haven't experienced it. Same thing with a lot of other paranormal type activity or what's reported from the paranormal side of things, or what people consider, a lot of people in the Bigfoot and paranormal consider what they call the woo. There's a lot of it I tend to stay clear of as far as, or not really discuss because I've never experienced it. I'll ask questions about it, or people will ask me about things like that, which is totally fine. I have no problem being asked questions about that. It's just, again, I don't have nothing to really share on it because it's something I haven't experienced. So
I can understand that, and I respect that too. It's just one of those things to where I've been curious about it because the only time I've ever heard or got into it, I have extreme skepticism of it because when it goes into it, it's like the only times that there's large reports of things like this, it brings me back to like the Summer of Sam murderer who ended up. Now, again, I'm not saying they're people doing anything wrong, but the Summer of Sam murderer, one of his things he did is he was talking to his neighbor's dog who was telling him to do these things. And it's just kind of gets me scratching my head. It's like, well, how is it that you're able to formulate these words? I can understand, like, if you've had a long connection, like with a very specific animal that rather it could be a horse, it could be a dog or something. And, it's like, okay, they know they don't want you to go down this way. And it's not words that are translated or images. It's just, you kind of know, right?
Right.
Like with your dog or your horse or whatever, your cat, whatever it may be, you can form a bond with it because it's a lifetime style bond to where it's like, you just kind of know, okay, well, this dog's looking at me because he really wants what I'm eating right now, or this horse really wants to go on this walk. That part I understand, and it's one of those things I do take with a lot of skepticism because when it starts saying you're carrying on these conversations, it makes it, again, like you said, it's hard to believe in the sense of, it's like, Are you wrong? Is the person wrong? No, they're not wrong. I just have no way of verifying it.
Right. That's
And
a very good way of putting it. Yeah.
and that's kind of where I sit with it. And it's like, because it's like some of the verifications you get, it turns to be kind of negative, and you're like, well, how can I say like, okay, you're absolutely 100% true when it's just that one aspect of experience? Because I see, and that's because the more I've looked into your work, I like it because it's very grounded in tangible things. And if it's not tangible, then you really don't have a way to report on it to say, okay, well, I know this is this because I was able to take this picture. And the thing, one of the ones that jumped out to me just here not long ago that you did was you had that doubled up bear track, which a lot of people would have been like, that's a Bigfoot print. And it's like, but if you've looked in, like if you've read books and even tracked bear, you know that front paw goes down and then the rear paw goes in the same place where it does. And sometimes they'll overlap, or other times they'll look like you got this part half print and the one laying on top of it. And so it's like that tangible thing. And I really like that. And so, again, it's just one of those things to where I just wonder if you've had people tell you, it's like, well, they tell me these things of the men in black are coming and hunting us, and that's why we don't come out. Because again, I've read reports and I've heard stories of things like that, and to where I'm like, I'm just curious if you found anything to that would have validity in this versus it's, because I think that kind of jumps a gap from being physical to more of a paranormal. And it's like, granted, yeah, I grew up in a haunted house, and I'd sit down. I could probably write a book about just the things that happen, because everything from sleep paralysis to like those weird encounters, no real visualizations, but just lots of odd things. And again, everybody could be like, that's nonsense, guys aren't real.
Right.
Okay, that's true, but I experienced something just like the person who had communications experienced something, so
right.
That's kind of where I stand with it, because unless I can go back and say, okay, 110%, you can go right here, right now and experience the exact same thing, then I can't say, okay, here's the document. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's just so much out there. I mean, as far as claims, what people claim, you want to believe them, but yeah, you can't discredit them either. You can't dismiss it.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, that's where like a lot of people will share their encounters with me and their stories, and like I'll listen to it, and sometimes my mind starts like playing a video, like I'm seeing stuff,
Yeah.
And then I could like picture it. I was like, and it's interesting how that happens. So, but where when that happens, it gives me that strong feeling of they really did have something happen. They really did experience something, So yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Well, the mental thing is something I have difficulty finding a way to verify it, but I have heard of things that people have mentioned of that they've heard, kind of they've called it a chatter or something. It's like it's their language, but it's a speech, but you don't know what they're saying.
Right.
And have you heard? Have you had reports of that as well, or?
Yeah, I've heard several, reports or stories along those lines where people are hearing what they call samurai chatter or whatnot.
Yes.
Oh man, what's the one gentleman's name? He was in the Navy. He was specialized in identifying languages. Last name Scott. Scott Nelson was his name. I'm sorry, first name Scott Nelson. One thing I found fascinating, something he discovered some years ago when his son was working on a school project and playing these different audios. And I believe the audios, the vocalizations and the audio that he was playing, I believe some of them came from the Sierra Sounds from Ronald J. Moorhead. And then he started studying themselves, And what he picked up was that there was syllables, and he there's actually an online public paper he did on this, but he broke down the syllables and the sounds. And what he concluded or discovered that there is a language, but it's not a language known to any humankind, which I always thought that was fascinating. So yeah. So yeah. Like I said, yeah. If you do a Google search for Scott Nelson's, I don't know what you like, Scott Nelson Bigfoot. You might find that information, Bigfoot language or whatever. So I shared it long time ago. I'll have to find it again. Maybe I'll reshare it just for the heck of it. So, but yeah. So I'm going to tell you what, we're actually coming to a close.
Okay.
This has been awesome, and apart from your experiences, I got to say, you have been very informative, and it's very clear and obvious that you're very knowledgeable with wildlife in general, and and everything around you. It's awesome, and I do want to ask you before we get out of here, for your Barry Bigfoot.
Yes.
Now you have a Facebook page for that. How would you like to direct people to go check that out if they want to buy the books or any of your merchandise?
Okay, so if you'd love to buy the books, which would be amazing, you can go to BarryTheBigfoot.com. It's its own website. I've got a little bio there. I've got all the products there. I have the 3 books here. Hang on, let me grab these right here. Sorry, it took me just a moment to grab everything. It's just farther back. So I have, so it's BarryTheBigfoot.com, and that's where you can find Barry Bigfoot Volume 1. And I have a fun sense of humor, and I basically are poking fun at a Bigfoot hunting show here. And Barry eludes the Bigfoot hunters in this one. The second one, brief little synopsis, it's Barry going to find his uncle to tell him about the Bigfoot hunters he saw. And then there's also Barry's Bigfoot Night Before Christmas, which is a rewritten poem of it's in the same format as The Night Before Christmas, but it's rewritten as Barry's perspective, and he gets to see Santa Claus in this as well. And then I have the coloring book, which these are all available on the website. And this is the front and back of the coloring book. This is my favorite just because of how it looks like you can see them from the back there too.
Oh yeah. Now you just came out with that one, right?
Yeah, I just had this one published because I'd had all these works, and my wife was like, "You need to get something so that way the little ones they can color along, and so you can have like all these fun pictures where you see them with on the Loch Ness Monster, him pointing at a UFO, to where it incorporates all sorts of the fun things in there, and this is." Again, it's just a lot of fun stuff in here. The stories are just, it's all family friendly. So it brings in little stuff. Again, it's BarryTheBigfoot.com. I've also just released these guys right here. I hand sew each one of these.
Wow.
So they can take up to 2 weeks to get done if I can get them positioned right. And so I hand sew them, and so everything here is made with love, made with the idea of to keep the whole family involved, and to have everybody a part of it. And then even I have some coffee cups on there, and it's like I've got tons and tons of content that I'm going to end up keep coming out with. But if you don't want to get any of the books or anything, I post a lot of pictures, a lot of short animations and even images of me building the things or creating things on Facebook, which is Barry Bigfoot on Facebook, or on Instagram, which is Barry Bigfoot _ at the end of it.
Okay.
And so you'll see the little animations I did. One of the animations I did are from, I haven't done any from the first book, which that's a real fun one, but there's a story. I did a animation about where Barry gets to meet his buddy Janky Yardbird, and
we had Janky. Yeah, Janky Yardbird was on the chat tonight. So
yeah, and he's awesome. And he's a friend of mine too. And there's also another animation where Barry encounters this little UFO crash to where, and I turned that into an animation. That was one of the ones to where he ends up. That took a long time to make, but it's only like 30 seconds long. And but again, it's like the to kind of bring it into Barry. It goes to where it's like I complained a lot about all the stuff being thrown at children, which I didn't agree with. I thought it was like all this extra propaganda, and children weren't allowed to have their imagination. They had to have all these extra social issues, and I'd complain about it. My wife was like, "Well, what are you going to do about it?" And I'm like, "Well, what am I going to do about it?" I'm like, I already have all these sketches and stuff, and so it's like, and not only we're doing things with our boys, I'm like, well, I'm going to bring one of my characters out, and I'm going to turn them into a book. And so the first book was I sketched it out with my boys, and they were laughing all about it because you have them like in this scene right here. It's like these guys are out calling Bigfoot late at night, and then he decides to answer back with his own comical way of passing gas to get their attention.
That's good. I like that.
And so it's just one of these things to where it's like you got these fun things about like that. And so, and then in the second book, he has all these other experiences. He has like, he's trying to help a porcupine because he thinks something's sticking it in the back. And well, then he gets porcupine quills in him, or he thinks he sees his buddy and he actually, in the second book, Barry Bigfoot misidentifies a bear as another Bigfoot. And so he sneaks up on him and he gives him a hug. It's just like one of the short stories here. Let me see if I can find it real quick. I know I can, but there's where he got grabbed up. He got hit by a porcupine, and then the bear hug is where he sees the bear and he thinks it's one of his friends he grew up with, and he snuck up and he gave him a hug. And so it's just like these things to where it's like, okay, he's going to have hardships, but yet he still has this good mentality and he still wants to do good. He's still wanting to be kind and friendly. And so it's like, I'm trying to get it to be imaginative, give these little nuggets of truth with Bigfoot along the way, but all in all, it's like to bring in the entire family to enjoy books that are not only fun, but they've got good morals, they've got good values, and it brings everybody together. And it's like, people ask me, it's like, what age group is it for? And I'm like, the whole family, because it's because I have a real young nephew who loves Barry Bigfoot, and he calls him a monster and stuff, and he'll make up his own little stories for him. But at the same time, he loves seeing him. He's got a plushie himself, and then my boys like the first book, and they'll go around the house yelling for whoomp at times, and it's like, and my oldest is just turned 13, and he still enjoys the books, and I've got one that's 9, and he likes them too. But then my nephew's like 3 or 4, and my sister will kill me because I don't know his exact age right now, but he loves it too. And it's like everybody who gets to read it, and they end up really enjoying it. And it's because it's like it's the intent behind it is to bring the family together and to have a good time with it. And like I said, all these books are available at barrythebigfoot.com. That's where you can get the better price on them. They are on Amazon, but they're higher on Amazon because I'm independently published. And so once I get them, I can get them here, and then I can share the discount from my website directly. So, okay,
very good. Now, for ladies and gentlemen, for those who do get out and are able to visit some of these Bigfoot encrypted conventions, I know Marcus will be at my event in June up here in Virginia. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but you'll actually be at the Penn, Ohio Paranormal Conference.
I'm trying to get to that one, and I don't know if that was I'm gonna be able to make that one, considering of logistics right now are not working. That one's still up in the air, unfortunately.
I know that would be a long drive for you guys too. Yes. So
because right now we're trying to I'm trying to sew a bunch of berries that I can have for the one to have some coming in for like the one in Eastern North Carolina, and then the one in South Carolina, and then I'm still having people starting to order the plushies online, and so I just sent another one out today, actually, because it's
Just curious, the one you're talking about in Eastern North Carolina, is that the Encounter Quest?
No, I don't know. That's the one in Marion. I keep saying Eastern.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's the WNC. Yeah, that's the Western North Carolina. Yeah.
I'm getting.
Yeah. It's okay. No, I was curious because there is a Bigfoot cryptid event happening in North Carolina, April 1st. It's my ex-girlfriend that's hosting it. So, that's in Hamlet, North Carolina. So, yeah.
Yeah, and what's also awesome about this is, so if anybody's going to these, if you don't know what our tent or setup's going to look like, just look for the 9.5 foot tall Barry, who looks very similar to this, except he has a full smile. He's very big, and he's painted all over the top of the tent as well. So
yes, I saw that. That's very cool that you did that. So. Yeah.
I'm making sure it's like, hey, this is Barry. I'm here. Come check out the stuff, and I'm still working on like other books that I have. I have a few other ones in the works on top of trying to figure out a sufficient way to start making animations to put out as well.
Right. Okay. Well, very good. So, ladies and gentlemen, you need to order your Barry Bigfoot gear and merchandise for your kids, grandkids, nieces, and nephews. I mean, they'll love it. So, and again, if you happen to attend one of these events that Marcus and Barry will be at, take advantage of that. So, but fortunately, as much as I want to keep going on, we're going to have to call it a night. So,
I appreciate you to understand. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh yeah, very welcome. This is a pleasure. We'll definitely have to have you on again because I do want to answer a question before because I wanted to throw it out there real quick. Robert Duvin was asking if this is something we do every so often. For those who are new and watching this and listen, we host this every Friday night. Every Friday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We usually go live with a guest. Now we do have coming up here in the month of February. We do have a couple round table talks with Bigfoot discussions. Next Friday, I believe I have our first round table, and the following Friday will be our second round table. And then the last Friday of the month, we go live with the Twisted Paranormal Society. Which they're a great group of paranormal team. They have their own TV show. They are also the producers of the new TV series called Hometown Haunts, where they filmed me for the first episode, The Beast of Elkhorn Lake, which is found on Paraflix. Yeah, so that was a lot of fun doing the filming, and we did some investigating on that, which was awesome. They'll be with us. We're going to be talking about some of their experiences and a little bit of everything. So. But ladies and gentlemen, as much as I hate to end this podcast now,
don't forget that I saw you have a couple books out now too.
I do. They've been out. I share them every so often. I actually have 4 of them.
Okay, I saw it. I'm like, wait a minute. You got to plug your own book too, because those look awesome, and you've got a lot of good knowledge. And if any of it that you shared with me here is in those books, they are worth getting.
Well, I tell you, there's some other things in those books where people will there's a lot of illustrations where I share where I gather some of my information and my knowledge from, and I go into some of the discussions on that. A lot of it ranges anywhere from religion, because there's religion brought up in some of them. So,
I could really go down a far rabbit hole, not only on the paranormal and Bigfoot with that aspect of it too, to where it's like I felt like I was trying to govern myself a little bit, because it's like I've really dug into it long, like for a long time.
Right. Oh yeah. But yeah, as far as the religion side of it, I only bring that up to make a point on where I'm standing or how I view some of the topics involved in the Bigfoot topic itself. I also have a children's book. It's called the Junior Bigfoot Activity Guide. Most of it's got some Bigfoot images in it. It has a lot of wildlife images in it, and with the pictures of the animals, I also have their track with it, so they can identify the animal and the track together. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a basic. It's got some stuff in basic stuff for kids to read, but it's more pictures than anything. And they could color in it. So yeah. But yeah, I'll be sharing. Like I've been doing one book at a time. Like I reshare them every so often. So I got the two I've been sharing on Facebook, and yeah, I'll put the other two out here soon. So, but so. Oh, what's this right here? Real quick before we go, Grin and Al says Barry go to the barbershop.
I do have him in a fancy suit that I was messing around with here. Well, there's one where he's if you're familiar with the God of War franchise, I had him done up like him, and then I have I have one where he's in this real fancy suit with a monocle. Here's one where he's in a fancy suit with a monocle right there.
Oh, nice. So, that's pretty good.
I have them in all sorts of different things to where it's like, again, it's for I intend it for everybody to have fun with it and to enjoy, and so
very awesome. So look, Grinning Owl is coming up with another one. Barry gets a pedicure. So very awesome. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the ideas are endless. I mean,
so. they really are. It's like there's a lot of fun, and like Barry, I'm gonna do him for years to where there's gonna be about every adventure you could think of. He's gonna end up going on it from like the Bigfoot perspective, but from my imagination. Of course, everybody has their own idea of it, but yet I've got so much with Barry to where it's like I just want him to grow and help. I want him to be a household name where everybody's like, oh, it's Barry Bigfoot, and it brings smiles to everybody's faces is the goal. So.
Absolutely. And with that being said, yes, we got to call it a night as my Wi-Fi is being eat up right now.
Well, thank you so much again for having me on. I greatly appreciate it. And again,
absolutely.
It's barrythebigfoot.com.
There you go. barrythebigfoot.com. Very good. Guys, check that out. And also, I know a lot of you guys that have been watching tonight are on Facebook. He does have a Facebook page. Go check that out. Make sure you like and follow the page because he's got more content coming out. So, and again, every Friday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on this YouTube channel. So share it around and put the word out there. And we love the interaction from you guys. And till next time, guys, keep it squatchy. And we're out.